So Vanessa, what's the day today and where are we?
Today's Monday, November 2nd, day before, famous November 3rd, Election Day, 2020.
2020, and what have we talked about in terms of 2020? What does that mean to us as a key idea?
2020 has to do with clear vision.
The year of clarity. All right. Okay, so we're sitting here, we're driving along a great plain. We're on the Colorado Plateau at some 6,200 feet, actually in Wyoming, going west. By the end of the day, we want to get past Jackson Hole, maybe over the southern mountains that we're going to have to pass over, the Grand Tetons. And then we're going to pull off and camp for the night. And we're listening to all this news and reportage on everything that's going on in the election. And we're going to ask a very simple question. Vanessa.
Right, we want to predict.
Yeah, why not? And this video is just going to be for our friends on Facebook. And to be clear, we're quite safe. There's very limited traffic here. I'm able to drive quite well while holding the camera because we wanted you to see Vanessa this time.
And I'm doing the steering.
Yeah, she's actually holding the wheel, looking ahead, and I'm holding the camera, and I got the control over the throttle. So this is just a Facebook posting, just so we can laugh at ourselves later how terribly wrong we might get it. Okay, we're driving along, and I have a question. This is the year of 2020. Things are going to clarify themselves. And what's going to clarify itself is the difference between this country's fate and this country's destiny. Do you have any sense of what that means, fate and destiny?
Well, someone that lives a fateful life is just someone that doesn't have a plan. They just wake up and they go day to day. It's sort of life takes them by the...
Well, whatever part of their anatomy you want to
by the horns.
Uh-huh.
And people that have destiny are those that take life by the horns and they make their day. They're not victims of their day.
So inherently, somebody who follows a faithful life just ends up living what the Easterners might call karma, where ideally somebody who lives a life of destiny is manifesting, hopefully, if they're positive, something we would call dharma. And the idea of dharma is that there's something greater they're serving than themselves. And the idea of karma is that they're not making very good choices and they're just going to end up living out a life like water flowing downhill, potentially into a swamp. Okay, so we want to get that clear because I mentioned those concepts earlier in an earlier video we did yesterday. Okay, so Vanessa, basically the United States is making a decision between fate and destiny. Now the interesting question is, which candidate represents fate and which candidate represents destiny?
Yeah, the irony is it depends on which side of the fence you're standing on.
Sure, Trump supporters are going to say he's a man of destiny, and Biden supporters are going to say no, he's just leading us down to this dark pit of fate, and that Biden's a man of destiny. But I think both of us would agree, neither of them are men of destiny, because neither of them have a bold, real bold, true vision for the future of this country and the world. And we both would agree that the only candidate we saw over this election cycle that had a vision was Bernie Sanders.
But in the last month, I have been feeling sort of a shift and an awakening of one side, Biden. So I've been feeling a little more confident of Biden, perhaps awakening to the destiny of this country.
And if he's elected, maybe we'll have a chance to see that your sense is going to play out, right?
Right. And 4 days ago, I had just sort of, this very sensitive, and I sense energies, and I felt this like a balloon deflating, and I could
However, how about over just the last day or two? What's your sense? Because that was like 4 days ago,
Right.
you said.
I'm still feeling Biden stronger. I think I have confidence that Biden will win.
So if I were to ask you directly, who's going to win tomorrow's election,
I would
ultimately?
I would say Biden.
Okay.
And I was correct last time, just by...
Oh, that's right. You had a sense of the last election, Hillary versus Trump. And what was that sense?
Well, it was at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was in Florida, Miami Beach, and I woke up and I went down to the beach. The polls had not opened in this country yet. It was 3 hours before, and I felt this great big black cloud coming over, just being siphoned in. And I said, oh my God, Trump is going to win.
All right, so I like to use my sensibility too about things, right? But frankly, I don't have a sense about the election that's very strong in either direction. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm being a little more cerebral about this. And when I be cerebral about it, I'm taking in a vast amount of information coming from many sources, as well as from my own sense of intuition. And all those sources basically say this whole election is a rat's nest of possibilities. And the reason I say that is this isn't going to be a straight election where everybody goes to the polls dutifully. Everybody's vote counts. And the outcome will be clearly decided by a national popular vote that basically says the majority of Americans who vote have come down swiftly and strongly for one candidate or another. Those kind of elections, frankly, never really occurred in the United States. There's a long history of voter suppression and, to some far lesser degree, voter misuse of the voting process. And I'll give you an example. People used to sell their vote for money or for the next meal.
That was recorded in the 1800s, right?
Yeah, the 1800s. And people were repressed by strong-armed gangs, political gangs in New York and elsewhere afterwards. So, bottom line, and in the South, black folks don't get to vote. And Native Americans are often excluded from voting. So there are many things, and Irish people when they came across from Ireland, and Polish, etc. So there has been a lot of very unethical, immoral, and illegal acts on the part of the people in power to suppress the votes of those who might depose them from power, and also to motivate the votes of those who might keep them in power. So as I said, this is a morass, and it's very, very difficult to tease out everything. Let's look at a few of these things. Let's look at the brightest possible potential. Tomorrow, everyone that has yet to vote goes to the polls and finishes actually voting. And there's predictions that this will be the largest turnout for an election in terms of pure population, maybe not percentage, ever in the United States.
Ever.
Percentage-wise, it may not be, but the pure sheer number of people voting. And let's say that there are no problems whatsoever. The polls are conducted honorably, as they were when Vanessa and I voted in Tucson, Arizona at the county. When we voted in Tucson, everything went incredibly smoothly. The Tucson poll workers and courthouse workers, whoever was there, did a great, honorable job of enabling us to vote. Let's say something comparable happens everywhere. Votes that go through the mail arrive with a postmark that says that it was a good vote. People who drop them in drop boxes, every one of those drop boxes were picked up without their votes being dumped or burned because somebody dropped a match inside of them, etc. People who went to the polls, voting machines honestly recorded their vote and did not switch votes later on in the cycle be due to some hidden artificial intelligence program that basically swaps votes to support the status quo politically. Let's say this vote goes honorably, and that there are what few questions come out of it are handled well in the courts. Bottom line, Biden wins hands down. And numerous senators, Democratic senators, win. And what you will see is you'll see a Congress that is basically not dominated but controlled by the Democrats, and a president who controls and is in power, is in power, not necessarily controls the White House. That's what you will see. Now what happens is, if things do not go well, you will see that now the weight begins to tip a little bit more in Trump's favor. Republicans for decades now primarily have been gerrymandering districts. They have been excluding voters through vote suppression of various means, and some Democrats too, but mostly Republicans have been doing this. It's absolutely essential that they do this if they were to be a viable political party, and they justify it on the basis that they believe what they believe is best for America, and anything they do to get themselves into power is righteous. It's called the Machiavellian principle that ends justify means. Now the teeter-totter is swinging a little more towards Trump. And let's say you add to it every possible court does everything they can to keep the status quo in power. Now it's teetering more towards Trump. And it gets to the Supreme Court, and it teeters more towards Trump. We eventually get to the point where jurisprudence, malpractice on the electoral front, etc., and to some degree lack of participation of voters that could have voted that didn't, swings this election to Donald Trump. That's what it'll turn out. The next thing is, let's say there's a mix and match thing that goes on. Some courts are honorable, some states are honorable. There's a slight tilt away from the kinds of crass election suppression practices that Republicans primarily have practiced in the past. A reasonable number of people turn out for the election. Now what we've got is we have a slog of a battle between now and the final investiture of the President of the United States in January 20th, 2021. It will be a teeter-totter. That kind of thing will go for Biden. Now, what about violence? What has to happen if things go awry is that people will have to say, look, we can't go out and march. If they go out and march, there could be agent provocateurs among them that will make them look bad. And this has already happened with the Black Lives movement. They should never have marched, because when they marched, they created opportunities for guys like the Umbrella Man to smash windows and make it look like they were out of control. But what they can do is they can say this: we are going to have an economic boycott. We are not going to support big box stores, big corporations, fast food outlets, on and on and on until the election is decided honorably. Then corporate America will be forced to throw its weight behind a just electoral outcome. Now that I've outlined all these possibilities, I would say there's probably a 55% probability that Biden and the senators from the Democratic Party will be in power after January 20th, 2021. But there's probably a 75% probability, slowing down here for road work, that the Senate will be taken over by the Democrats and Trump will be in power. Now, if Trump is defeated, there's a very strong likelihood that he will make a deal with the Democrats not to destroy the federal government in the time he has left, because he will want to burn it down. That's his personal nature. He doesn't want to hear the American people say, "You're fired." And if he is fired, he would want to see whatever corporation fired him fail, because he is a vindictive, counterpunching type personality. He's transactionalist. He's very focused in his lower emotions. He doesn't really care that much about people. He cares about him and his. And I hate to have to characterize a human being this way, but I will say his virtue is he's an authentic human being. He is what he is, and that is why he got elected to begin with, because people did not like the inauthenticity of the potential Clinton presidency. So effectively, I am saying by the end of this week, the newspapers will be proclaiming that Trump has been fired. You're fired, Donald Trump, from the presidency. But he will do everything he can, and the Republican Party will do everything he can through the courts to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, I want to say one more thing. To all those wonderful people out there who are Trump supporters, and we've met many of them, and we've also talked to many of them, we understand why you support him. We really do. You are good people. You are good people. You focused on something that you saw in Trump, his authenticity and the fact that he wanted to get rid of the deep state, and you said that you supported him. But the reality is, you have to understand that politicians in general always figure out a formula to appeal to people's better and lower natures in order to get elected. And this man, in my estimation, has done exactly like that to get elected. Sad to say, if I sat down with Donald Trump and we were to have a conversation, I'd probably like the guy too. And that's it for me. Final words from Vanessa in a moment. Okay, Vanessa, I agree. I really appreciate your sensitivity in things, and you did kind of call that last election long before anybody voted. And frankly, at that time, we didn't pay much attention to polls or anything else. So, frankly, we did not really care for Clinton in the last election for a number of reasons. So we didn't follow it that closely.
We were for Bernie last time,
yeah,
too.
we were for Bernie. And so what I want to say, tell you is that I think your sensitivity was really good last one. But I want to speak to your mentality rather than your sensitivity. What is your sense of what I just said? And what about it makes sense to you in particular? And is there anything I said that was incorrect, that you felt like, oh, that's not quite right, or Jeff, you could have, I think you're off a little bit
No,
here.
I thought it was a good synopsis, and I would agree that we know many Trumpsters that we like, and we meet them all over, and decent human beings, as both sides are. We have to start seeing the positive in each other.
However, we have to say this, brothers and sisters who support Trump, really think about the difference between fate and destiny. Destiny is moving forward into the future and creating something beautiful. But you have to admit, making America great again is basically a return to the past. It is not a vision of the future. Now, the one thing that Trump did, I thought was a vision of the future, was the Space Force. But that sounded a bit militaristic to me. So what we really need to do is remember John F. Kennedy when he talked about what this Apollo space program and how we needed to venture to the moon, not because it was the easy thing, but actually because it was hard. And when you do a hard thing together as a community, as a nation, you are so exalted and you feel so good about it. And you have a direction, you have a star in the heavens, you have some place you're going. We need to come together and go there together. And it has to be a vision that we all share, and that's why you have to have buy-in from everyone. We can't just have Trumpsters, we can't have Bernieites, we can't have Bidenites. We have to find a vision that brings us all together so that we can work in harmony to accomplish something great as a country and as a planet, because there is no planet B. There is no planet B until we find a way to move from this earth and travel to the stars. Adios.